Oh, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, so we left off yesterday. Whenever you're ready. We left off yesterday talking about the Doppler effect and what happens when waves are produced by moving sources. Then we looked at sonic booms and the Mach cone, the fun little Mach cone, and the pressure waves that are created when things move faster than the speed of sound. This cloud here, what is this cloud? It's a rarefaction, good. Because you can't see the compressions, but you can see the rarefactions behind the object moving faster than the speed of sound. And yeah, there you go. Any questions about this stuff before we move on? Yeah.
Is it rarefaction or rarefaction?
Faction. Faction.
Faction.
Faction, like a group.
Faction.
Faction. Faction. No, fact. Like faction. Like, are you a part of his faction? You know. Yeah.
So what about the picture in the orange? Is that, does that have the compressions on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the light colored are the compressions and the dark colored are the rarefactions. Or the other way around. It might be the dark, but anyway, yeah, so these are the sonic boom from the front of the vehicle, the cockpit, the edge of the wing, and the tail.
Can we please? Come here,
What's that? Yeah, you can make that. Make some posters. Take a couple t-shirts.
Yes.
Okay, so today we are talking about acoustic resonance. We are talking about acoustic resonance. What in vibration?
Bryce, do you have one of those for every scenario?
I need a hat. Okay, so when objects are forced to vibrate, like I seem to have misplaced my ruler. Ah, there it is. Thank you. So the singing rods are still up here. You're welcome to play with them. So when objects are forced to vibrate at their natural frequency, when you give them energy, sometimes they will make noise. That's called mechanical resonance. Yeah, that's called mechanical resonance. The rods are still up here. Now I have to hold this right in the middle to get it to resonate. If I hold it somewhere else, it won't do anything. Although if I hold it right in the middle and then the middle again, I will produce what's called an overtone. Still get a little bit of noise.
A little bit.
Yeah. So I can hold it in the middle and get one tone. I can hold it in the middle of the middle and get another tone. So when objects get energy, they can mechanically resonate. Your face does this when you talk. You cause your face to vibrate. So a bunch of aluminum rods up here. If you've ever done this thing with the wine glass where you go around and around, you can cause the wine glass to vibrate, and it helps if you have a dog. It helps. Helps if you have a dog. Now, in addition to rods like this vibrating, air vibrates. Most instruments that we deal with use a vibrating column of air. And in physics, we classify objects that resonate as either open pipes or closed pipes, depending upon how many closed sides they have. A closed pipe is closed at one end and open at the other. One area for energy to go in and close at the other end. So the critical thing to understand about a closed pipe is it needs to be 1/4 the wavelength, the size of the wavelength you want to make. So if you want to make a wave that has a wavelength of 1.0 meters, then the size of the instrument has got to be 0.25 meters. Pretty much, there aren't a lot of closed pipe instruments. Whistles are closed pipe instruments, but that's about it. And can you see why, in your mind's eye, can you imagine why an instrument only has to be 1/4 the size of the wavelength you're making? Okay, so I listed an antinode here and a node here. Now if you look at a typical wave, like that, set the equilibrium point there, how many nodes does this wave have? node there, and a node there. Okay? Again, a node is a point of no amplitude, where the air or the string or whatever it happens to be appears to not move. How many antinodes do you see? Two. Okay? So there's an antinode there and an antinode there. The whole thing is the antinode, by the way. There's the antinode. So you can look at a wave and you can realize the wave is really can be broken into pieces. So you can look at this quarter wave, this quarter wave, this quarter wave, and this quarter wave. So a wave can actually be broken into quarters, and that's what happens in a closed pipe. You have an antinode here, so set the equilibrium point there, and the node here. So when you blow into a closed pipe, like a whistle, you get a quarter of a wave there. That quarter of the wave is then reflected back. That quarter of the wave is then reflected back, and that quarter of the wave is then reflected back. And what you get is, after it's bounced 3 times, you get 4 quarters of a wave completing the sound wave. Does that make sense? Okay. For a closed pipe, because the energy is going to bounce. You're going to put energy in, the energy is going to bounce, 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 and once it's made its complete wave, then you get the sound wave that you can hear, and the wave will have 4 times the length of the instrument. That's for a closed pipe. Not a lot of closed pipes out there. Most instruments aren't closed, they're open pipes, because it's a lot easier to blow into something if the air just keeps going through. You keep blowing through. 1 than 2.
Why does a whistle have a little ball in it?
So it warbles. Yeah. Otherwise, it just go. But it's like the people under. We can hear that easier because the little thing spins around. So most instruments and guitar strings are open pipes. And realize, I know a guitar string is not a pipe, but it still follows the same math. If we want to make that same, 1 meter wavelength, then for an open pipe, the instrument has to be half a meter long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And hopefully you can kind of see, with an open pipe, it tells us there's going to be a node there and an antinode here. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark the antinode there. Actually, I'm going to mark the antinode there and here, and the node right here, and then that's the equilibrium point. So what happens is wave energy comes in at an antinode, travels through the node, and then gets reflected back to complete the wave. So in an open pipe, the instrument holds half the wavelength. So the instrument has to be half the wavelength of the wave you want to make. Yes? Correct. I know. I wish I was a good enough artist to draw longitudinal waves in there, but I'm not. I'm drawing them as transverse waves as a model. But yeah, you're right. Longitudinal waves, sound waves are longitudinal waves. We just draw transverse waves so so you can see them. Because otherwise what you draw is like a compression with a bunch of piled up dots and a rarefaction with fewer dots. It just wouldn't look.
Where does the node go on that wood?
That,
The compression, so you have the space.
the rarefaction. Yeah. So if you had a sound wave that looks like that, then the compressions would be where they're piled up. They would be antinodes, and the nodes would be the rarefactions. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? That's a good question. I just wish I was a better artist that I could draw the model in there, and I can't. Other questions? Okay, cool. So let me ask you this. Let's say we want to make an instrument to produce a tone of 480 hertz. Okay. We're going to make a tone of 480 hertz. And we can assume that the air that vibrates inside the column is vibrating at 340 meters per second. That's the speed of sound. It's pretty close. One thing I do want to mention is the vibrating air inside an instrument, is it more dense, less dense, or the same density as the air outside the instrument? The air inside the instrument, is it more dense because it's vibrating inside? You're like, so is it more dense, less dense, or the same density as the air around it? It's a little more. And the reason it has to be a little more is the energy has to basically bounce. And remember, when wave energy travels from one medium to another medium, that's why waves bounce. So the wave energy is going from vibrating air to stale air. That's what causes the wave to bounce. Without that difference in density, the wave won't bounce and it'll out of go. Okay? It was just like blowing through a tube, like blowing through a straw. Okay? The moment you cause that straw to vibrate and the air inside vibrates, then you get an instrument where actually sound will be produced. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So I want to produce an instrument that produces a tone of 480 hertz. Let's call it a string. Let's make it a string instrument. And we remember that velocity is wavelength times frequency. So wavelength has a unit of meters, frequency has a unit of per second. So that's going to be meter per second. My ask for you is, how long does that guitar string have to be? How long do I have to make it? How long does that guitar string have to be to produce a 480 hertz tone? Bum, 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 bum. You can do your math. Who thinks they might have an answer? Michael. So how big does the instrument have to be? No. Yeah, 0.35. Yeah, 0.35. So the vibrating string needs to be half the length of the tone you want to make. So if you want to make a wave that's 0.71 meters, 0.71 meters times 480 would be 340 hertz, or 340 meters per second. So the wave you want to make is 0.71 meters. We're going to need an instrument that is half that distance, if it's a string. Okay. Does that idea make sense? Okay, so most instruments are open pipes. Closed pipes take a lot more energy to get going, and the air just kind of vibrates inside, a little more difficult to build than an open pipe where you can constantly blow through it. All right, this is my Rubens Tube. You're probably wondering what this thing was this whole time, right? It's like, no, we heard about it. So, get this thing going. It's a giant cylinder of gas. Takes about 40 seconds to a minute to fill up. So let me explain to you what's going to happen. Unless you want to skip this. You want to see it. It's fire, right? So in the end of my Rubens Tube is a speaker. That speaker is connected to a tiny amplifier, which is then connected to my phone. And on my phone, I have a device that will play music. I plug in the amplifier, so I can play various tones. like you're getting your ears teched. Can you hear that? Okay, so I'm going to basically play these tones into the column, and the air is going to vibrate and create a standing wave in the Rubens tube. You ready?
Is this where you play the music and it starts messing with
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so that's 300 hertz. And what I want to do is find out what the natural frequency of my Rubens tube is going to be. I want to know what the natural frequency is. Basically, the lowest frequency that will cause this to vibrate. So here's the thing. There are things called overtones or harmonics that are multiples of the natural frequency, which we're going to call the fundamental. So I want to know what the fundamental is. If I find that I can make a standing wave with 300, 400, 500, 600, that means the fundamental is 100 hertz. Does that make sense? So I'm going to start at 400. So not a great wave. Let's see if I can refine it a little bit. I don't know what's going on down here. This is goofy. All right, so that's 325 hertz. Can you hear me over this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 325 hertz. So we have a peak here and a peak here, and there should be a peak here, but the gas is having trouble making it out. There's just simply too much energy in the gas. Now I'm going to double that, get to 650. Let's look at what that looks like. Ideally, we want a nice, strong wave. There we go. Okay, so you can see the bump here, and the bump here, and the bump here, and the bump here. You can kind of see the bump here. This is 600 hertz. Is this an open or a closed pipe? It's closed. There's an open end for the sound to come in, and then there's a closed end. So if this is a closed pipe, down here, is this an antinode or a node? It's a node. So if I drilled holes all the way down, the wave would basically petered out and there'd be nothing down here. So this is a node right here. What is this? Antinode. What's this? Okay, and this is at 600 hertz. So I got a good standing wave at 600 hertz with 1, 2, 3, 4 antinodes. I think that we should be at around 500 hertz for the next one. Okay, this is called dissonance, where there's nothing built up, there's no resonance. The sound wave's just a mess. Let's see if we can make another one. Seeing a wave starting to come up. There we are. Okay, so now we're at 410 hertz. How many antinodes do you see? Okay, how many antinodes did you see? 3. So we have 3 antinodes. So we would think if 406, maybe 200 might work too. I don't know, let's find out. That's 208. So at 200 hertz, got two antinodes. So that would seem to suggest that the fundamental is probably about 100 hertz. The problem is I can't really show that because there's so little energy. This is what happens. You can see a little bit of an antinode right here. That's how it works. You build up a wave, and the sound is basically creating a standing wave in the column. Yes? Okay. Well, if we play a song, we're not going to get a good solid tone, so it won't make a wave. But we can definitely play a song. Let's see this. Any requests? The Napoleon. Do I just get, can I get that on YouTube?
It's called Canteen.
It's called what?
Canteen.
Canteen?
Fergalicious.
It's like there's one person. Trash.
I can't say it's like jam.
Wikipedia, IMDb. Oh, come on. Okay, I gotta go to YouTube. Okay, I can't find that one. I'm going to YouTube.
I have it right here.
Is it queued up and ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, bring it over.
Yes. It's Oxford, right?
Yes, it's an ox.
Auxiliary.
It's a, yes, I know. This is a new word for me because I just learned this about 5 years ago. I've always called it an eighth inch stereo audio cable. Like, it's an aux cord. Okay, fine. In the 80s, it was an 1/8 inch audio
Should I have my
cable.
headphones all the way up?
Yeah. We're rapidly running out of gas. Yeah. Let it refill. Refill, refill. Okay, that was all sorts of fun. I'm sorry, what? Look at that, we set the fire alarm off.
I wish.
I hate school. Okay. Well, I have been making fire, but with these new sensors. Okay, so let's move on. So hopefully that was an interesting activity to see the nodes and antinodes that are formed in this case, closed pipe. It's kind of a great way to visualize the actual vibrating air inside. Otherwise, it's very hard to visualize vibrating air. Okay, so these are harmonics. These are harmonics of strings. Now, strings act like open pipes, where the first harmonic, called a fundamental, only shows you half the wave, because half the wave gets reflected to create the other half of the wave. If the frequency of this harmonic is, let's make it really, really easy, if this frequency is 200 hertz, then the frequency of this must be what? 400 hertz. Okay, it's just going to be multiples, and this one's going to be how much?
600.
Yeah, 600, and this one's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 800. So yeah, hopefully you saw basically this is what was happening. We're creating fundamentals and what were called overtones or harmonics in the tube. The fundamental was probably 100 hertz, but it was just a mess. You weren't going to be able to see it. And then there was dance. Okay, beats. Beats are really interesting. Beats are a tone that you hear when two tones are really close to each other. Let me show you what I mean. This is 440 hertz. Listen to this.
Are you doing it loud?
Yeah.
Okay, is it like the gas smell detector?
Did the fire alarm go off?
No, but we can smell it and they're burning down the hallway.
You smell horrible.
We're working with gas, right?
Yes, we're good. It's done now. Okay, so you hear that? And hear this? Okay, now listen to this. You hear the warbling? That's from beats. I'm going to actually make it really low. Hear that? Let me show you what I mean. That's a fun little animation about this. So beats are created when you have two tones very close in frequency to each other. So here's two drums, and their frequency is slightly off. There's going to be a point where they're going to overlap and be in phase. They'll hit at the same time. And now they're in phase. And if you look at these two balls bouncing up and down, the red balls are slightly out of phase. There's going to be a point, they're slightly different frequencies, there's going to be a point at which they will be totally in phase, and there's a point where they're totally out of phase. They're about to be totally out of phase, where their amplitudes will destructively interfere, right? Now. Okay? And if we wait a while, their amplitudes are going to be perfectly in phase, and they will constructively interfere. Which will be, yes, like two little skips. So right about now, they're in phase. Now they're in phase. And if you looked at it and you graphed it with a transverse wave, this would be the representation of the ball 1 with transverse wave, ball 2, and this is their sum. If you added their amplitudes, this is the sum. Does this look like anything? A heartbeat. A fish. How about a wave? In fact, if you were to extend this out, over a long amount of time, you're going to see the rest of the wave. It's going to make another wave with a frequency that just happens to be the difference between the original two waves. If you like math, here's some math. I know how much you enjoy math, so there's some math. You can prove it to yourself. You can punch it in your calculator and get those. You're like, okay, I'm good. Okay, so here's 440 hertz for the speaker. Here's 442. And here's them together. So the beat frequency is created when you have two waves that are very, very close together. Okay, so if you had a tuning fork at 380 and another one at 400, what was the beat frequency you would hear? Nope, not 390. Look at the formula. 20 is the difference between the two. So it's just one minus the other. So 20 hertz. If you had one at 278 and one at 288, what would it be? You'd have a beat frequency of 10. Okay. And again, here's a visualization of the harmonics. Is this an open pipe or a closed pipe? How much of a wave do you see in each instrument? You only see 1/4 of the wave. So this is actually a closed pipe. These are the harmonics for closed pipes. With a closed pipe, you're going to have a node at one end, at the solid end, and you're going to have an antinode at the open end. That's the way you remember. Open end is going to be an antinode. Closed end will be a node. So just like with the other harmonics, node, antinode, node, antinode, node, antinode. With an open pipe, you're going to have an antinode on both sides. Okay. Questions about this stuff? I'm ready to move on if you're ready to move on. Some of you are still scribbling. Let's make some beats while we're waiting. This little wait changes the frequency just a little bit. Really close. If I bring it way up, it'll change a lot. It should go blah, 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 blah. Also helps if I separate them a little bit. Okay, moving on. I can do that. I'm not worried about that. Okay, sense of hearing. This is actually kind of fun. I like this because a lot of you have ears, and it's fun to know how they work. So these are the basic parts of our ear. Is there somebody who doesn't have ears?
Yeah. He doesn't have one ear.
Who doesn't have one ear?
Ben Fraser.
Oh, okay.
He was born with this card, so yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so unless you're a wrestler, your ear probably looks like this. And then you have an ear canal and an eardrum. And here's the crazy thing. How is it that you can hear what I'm saying? And how is it that you all hear basically the same thing?
It like vibrates.
Exactly. It vibrates, and there's a special name called sympathetically. So the eardrum vibrates sympathetically to the tones that are coming down the ear canal. This happens when, if you're next to you, if you have your drum next to somebody else who's drumming and you're not drumming, sometimes your drum starts vibrating. You encountered this before? Yeah. So your eardrum has to vibrate sympathetically to the tones coming in. And it's really good at just bouncing with a tiny little drum going back and forth. And then that vibration is sent down the anvil to the hammer. And the hammer vibrates back and forth, sending information into the cochlea where tiny little fibers will send nerve impulses to the brain. Pretty slick. I also really like this. So what's basically happening is the eardrum is hitting the anvil, and the anvil's hitting the hammer. In Warcraft, the hammer hits the anvil. In your ears, the anvil hits the hammer. So the anvil's hitting the hammer. Have you ever got out of a concert and it was like really, really quiet?
Yeah.
Ever wondered why that was?
My first concert, Hannah Montana.
I'm sure it was. So things that Tyler said make perfect sense.
What did he say?
Nothing about you. It was just about himself and his experiences. But anyway, so the eardrum is causing the hammer to vibrate back and forth. To protect the cochlea and everything inside, the hammer will actually move. It'll slide down the anvil. So instead of moving it like this, it slides down, it moves a lot less. So you can actually move the parts of your ear to protect yourself. Because if your eardrum ruptures, that can be repaired. If you get damage to your cochlea, that's a lot harder to be repaired. Sometimes it can't be repaired at all. You just have permanent hearing damage. Yeah, so there you go. Not cool. You don't want permanent hearing damage. Oh, also, it's also kind of fun. If you put an earbud right here, you know why earbuds are a lot louder than normal speakers? And if I can hear you through your earbuds, you're doing some serious damage to yourself? What you're doing is you're creating a closed pipe. And the sound waves are constantly bouncing off your eardrum, and then the earbud, the eardrum, and the earbud. It's basically, it makes a lot of noise with a lot less energy. It's a very efficient way to do a speaker. But if I can hear you when you're on your earbuds, that's really bad. Because it means there's so much vibration that's actually leaking out. There's so much energy that's actually leaking out, and you're definitely doing some damage to yourself. Yeah?
So would headphones be an open pipe?
No, they're still a closed pipe. Because the anvil is actually acting as a solid object. But it's not a sealed chamber anymore. Like this is a sealed chamber.
So it's not as bad.
Well, neither of them are as bad. It's just earbuds can basically make a lot more volume for you with less energy. And if you're hearing somebody who has their earbuds on, they're way, way, way too loud. Okay. Humans can hear in the range of 20 to 20,000 hertz. This is pretty generous. Maybe a toddler. I don't think anybody in this room could hear anything near 20,000 hertz. My guess is you and I would top out somewhere around 12 or 13. But we just basically say, yeah, 20,000. Anything that is higher than 20,000 is called ultrasonic, above sound. So ultrasonic is above 20,000 hertz. And anything below 20 hertz is called infrasonic, as in below sound. And again, I very much doubt anybody in this room could hear at 20 hertz. We can definitely feel at 20 hertz. At 20 hertz, that's where you start like feeling it. Actually, you start feeling about 100 hertz. But I very much doubt you're going to feel or hear anything at 20 hertz.
Are you guys smoking?
We were.
Oh, you were? So that's what the smell is in here?
Probably.
Okay. Just making sure that like it's not like a.
A gas leak?
Yeah. First place I checked, Mr. Myers.
Yeah.
We may or may not be burning.
What was the below sound called again? Was it infrasonic?
Infrasonic. It's the same infra as infrared. Okay, so you probably heard that dogs can hear things that we can't hear. It's true. They can hear upwards of 45,000 hertz. Tiny little whistles. What you probably don't know is cats can hear even better. And some bugs even higher than that. Cats can hear upwards of 80,000 hertz. Okay. You also might know that you have older people that you've heard the mosquito sound, like, oh, people can't hear it. It's funny. Well, it turns out they can't because they're old. And what happens as we age, we lose elasticity in our eardrum. So our eardrum can't vibrate as well. So as we age, we lose elasticity and we lose the high tones first. So again, even at our age, you in your teens and me in my 40s, I don't think we can hear anywhere near 20,000. And then your grandpa probably hears upwards of maybe 4,000 or 5,000 at tops. So don't talk to grandpa with a really high voice. He won't be able to hear you. Yeah.
So how exactly would a hearing aid help?
It's a speaker. It listens and reads. Well, it depends on the hearing aid. Some hearing aids will actually change the tone so the person can actually hear it better, but then they're not hearing the same voice you are. Most hearing aids just listen and repeat. And then cochlear implants work entirely differently. They actually go ahead and vibrate the implant, the cochlea itself. They just bypass all this stuff. Crazy stuff. Okay. That's it. Any questions? All right. I have a worksheet for you, and I also have the singing rods up here. If you want to play with the singing rods, you can play with the singing rods if you wish. The stuff is all up here. If you want to leak gas into the neighborhood, we can do that too.